Yeah, g'day YouTubers. Tinker O'Toole again with another video. Today we're going to talk about the complete guide of splitting axes and splitting mauls. I've got about 29 and I've got the most expensive, the Grand Force Brux Maul, $350 Australian, so very, very expensive. You might sort of say, is it really worth it? Anyway, we'll go over what I've got and we'll give a recommendation for beginners on splitting axes and splitting mauls. What's the difference? We'll talk about angles on the beveled edge, which is a secondary angle. The primary angle is the wedge. So we'll talk about that on the splitting axes and the splitting mauls. And we'll go over the geometry a little bit, curved cheeks, flat cheeks, where the blade in the middle is raised, that's referred to as convexed. So we'll talk about that. And in the end, we'll come to a bit of a conclusion. And look, if you've got any questions, I'd be greatly appreciated. We're not running off a script here, so when you've got to talk for about a half an hour, it's quite easy to say something wrong or make a little mistake. So if I make a little mistake, please forgive me, but I'll try my best not to slip up. Now what you see in front of you is the first one, the green one, is a block splitter. It's an 8-pounder, simple 30-degree wedge shape. So 8 pound, 3.6 kilo. The second one looks a little bit like an American type style block splitter, where it's got a fairly large curve on it rather than a straight edge. And it's got a little bit of a curved cheek in there. One thing you'll notice about block splitters, they'll have 900mm handles, so they're a lot longer. The two on the right-hand side are from Spear and Jackson. They're 6-pounders, and that's 2.7 kg, and they're still regarded as block splitters or mauls. They've got the little hammerhead. This one's a little bit bigger, this one's a little bit smaller, but nonetheless, you can drive wedges in on them. What you have to be careful is using splitting axes. The hardness at the back, if it's too hard at the back, it can crack. And that's why they make sure that they've got to change the hardness a little bit different on the back, on the rear, as opposed to the hardness that's on the front. So yeah, that's one of the reasons you've got to be careful with a maul. It's not the handle that's the weakest part, it's this part here that can split, especially if it's got a very, very small head on the back. So if we go inside, we can have a look at some of the collections I got, and we can sort of talk about a splitting axe and a splitting maul, and we'll go over the angles and all the things that you should be looking out for, especially if you're thinking of purchasing one. You're not too sure. So if you've just got into wood splitting, hopefully the information that I present, I've got some of the best splitting axes and mauls that are available here in Australia. Obviously, I don't live in Europe. They've got a few more, but I've got a lot of European ones that they bring into the country also. So first of all, we can talk about a splitting axe, and we've got a really great brand here in the Stihl. Stihl use Ochsenkopf. Ochsenkopf is a German company, and if you look at this particular splitting axe here, you'll notice it's called AX28CS. It's got Ochsenkopf there. Don't know whether you can read that. Hopefully you can. 2.5 kg on the head weight. Now 2.5 kilograms, but the overstrike protector that's on that, and there's a little metal plate on the front to stop it coming off with a bolt. So that adds up to about 2.8 kilograms. That's why it's called AX 28, 2.8 kg. You look at the handle, the handles can vary anywhere from about 800 grams to 900 grams. So it really bumps up 2.8 kilo. It weighs about 3.9 kg total weight. When you actually look at it, you'll see a nice curve on there. It looks like an axe. And when you look at the wedge shape, right, that's a 20-degree wedge. An axe can be anywhere from about 12 degrees up to about 15 degrees on that main wedge. Then you've got a secondary beveled edge. That secondary beveled edge in Australian wood has to be sharp, not blunt. Overseas in softwood, Pinus radiata, some of the birches, some of the ashes, they don't need to have a razor sharp edge. So if the primary wedge can be anywhere from 20 degrees to a maximum of, say, 30 maximum, split neck shouldn't be any more than that. When you get to 30 degrees, that's what most of the splitting maul wedges are. So for the most part, most of my splitting axes are in the range of 20 degrees to 25 degrees. That is the main range. And this beveled edge on here would be anywhere from 30 degrees to 35 degrees. If it's much more than that, and I've had them where they're really bad, and I've had to reprofile them. So, as I said before, it's 20 degrees on the wedge. And the handle length is 800 millimeters in length, and that's 32 inches. So your splitting axe can range from 1.5 kilos to, this has got a total weight of the actual overstrike protector of 2.8. So we can say 2.7 because a lot of the splitting axes are 6-pounders. They can go anywhere from 4 pound to 6 pound. And it's much better if they're fitted with an overstrike protector, because if you don't have an overstrike protector, very, very easy to damage the wood. So that's the Stihl Oxenkoff. They're around about $179, something like that here in Australia. The next one in the Stihl range is also Oxenkoff, is the splitting maul. The splitting maul has a 30-degree wedge on it, and we can just sort of pull that out so you can have a little bit of a look at that. And this is typical of a maul, 30-degree wedge. All right, that's a 30-degree wedge, and here you've got a large square bit here to drive in the metal wedges or the plastic wedges. Secondary bevel. So if we've got 30 degrees on the main wedge, you can have anywhere between 35 degrees, preferable, up to about 45 degrees on that secondary beveled edge. What you've got to be careful of is if that beveled edge on the splitting axe and the splitting maul, the greater the angle in Australian hardwood, the more difficult it is to penetrate to start the splitting action. It's a different story overseas, right, where you've got softwood. A good example of softwood and hardwood, and we talk about wood density as well, is that if you look at Pinus radiata, it's got a density between, density is measured kilograms per cubic metre. So Pinus radiata is roughly between 500 and 600 kilograms per cubic metre. Australian hardwood is between 900 kilograms a cubic metre and 1.3 tonne a cubic metre, depending on the species. The other thing that's different, Pinus radiata and a lot of the softwoods overseas have straight grains that sit beside each other. The fibres are all sitting beside each other. So when that wood dries out, it splits easy. Pinus radiata is almost impossible to split when it's wet. It's probably got in excess of 50% water or something like that in there. Huge content of water. And when you cut pine, it also weeps out a lot of resin, sap. The moment that that wood dries out, it's so easy to split. Because the wood goes from being soft and spongy to a little bit more brittle, and being a little bit more brittle, and the fibres are straight, it splits so easily. Here in Australia, it's a total opposite. Eucalypt timber, when it's green, it has fibres that are interlocking and twisted. That interlocking and twisted fibres, when it's green, has a little bit of flexibility in those fibres. There's water contents up a lot higher. as that water evaporates out and it becomes seasoned, those flexible interlocking fibres are no more flexible. They've gone hard. And that's why it's so difficult to split seasoned eucalypt apart, because those fibres are entangled and locked in and no longer flexible. So with the splitting maul, the difference is that a splitting axe is generally about 1.5 kilos up to about 2.5 kilos, roughly in that range, 2.7. So, you know, it goes anywhere from 4-pounder to a 6-pounder. With an 800mm handle traditionally, roughly. And you can swing that pretty good, but as you get heavier into the maul, a 7-pound or an 8-pound maul, they're starting to get heavy, and they've got a length of 900mm in length. And as we saw, this wedge is 30 degrees, and this little edge on here, you notice it's a lot smaller because it's a maul, whereas this edge on the splitting axe represents a little bit of an axe shape, more of a curve of an axe, and it's about 115mm. A normal axe will be a lot wider than that, more like around 150mm. So that's the difference between the maul. The maul is your heavy duty type splitter, which is designed for your larger rounds. I have a little bit of a formula. It works pretty good. And my formula is for every 6 inches width of wood, you roughly need just over 1 kilogram. So therefore, a 6-inch log, 1 kilo to 1.5 maximum. A 1-foot log, you can go 2 kilo up to about 2.5 kilo. And an 18-inch log, you want at least 3 kilos and slightly upwards. When you get into the 2-foot range, diameter, you want something, yeah, it's got to be 8-pounder plus the handle. Now, it's interesting when we talk about handles, wood handles versus plastic handles. Plastic handles are lightweight. On the Fiscus range, some of them, lucky if they'd weigh 300 grams. You look at the Maul here, all the Maul handles are 900mm in length, generally speaking. They're a little bit longer by their 36 inches as opposed to 32 inches on that. And typically these weigh around 1 kilogram. So therefore, if you look at the total weight of this is called a C, I think it's AX33. And AX33 stands for, this is 3 kilo head, but with the overstrike protector in the middle, this comes to 3.3 kilo. Add the handle, which would probably weigh over 1 kilo, makes it about 4.5 kg total weight. So yeah, it's quite heavy. It's not the heaviest out there. The Fiscus IsoCore Pro is 3.6 kilo, but the handle weighs a little bit more than 1 kilo. We'll have a look at that in a minute. Then you've got the Husqvarna Sledge Axe, and this Husky Sledge Axe, which is this one here. This is 230mm in length, and it's also got a very, very narrow wedge on it. We'll zoom back out there so that you can see that. That's the narrow wedge on it, right? And narrow wedges tend to get stuck in timber, in softer timber, rather than really hard timber. Now, when we look at the Fiscus Maul, it's got curved cheeks on it, right? Now, the cheeks that are on the Stihl Oxenkoff have got very, very slight curved cheeks, hardly anything at all. Not really that noticeable. And also on the Stihl Oxenkoff, if you were to have a look in the middle, it's higher, so it's convexed slightly. Typically, a lot of the splitting axes are all convexed. Even the splitting maul is convexed. That tries to eliminate it getting stuck in the timber. In Australian hardwood, it doesn't make that much difference because it's that bloody hard. But you can certainly see the cheeks on this here. Nice curve on them. And the blade in the middle is raised, so it's convexed. And it's got a hammer head on it of about 70 millimeters wide for striking in those metal wedges. Total weight of this, it's a 4.95. So you might as well almost say that it's 5 kg total weight. Depends on how tall you are. You can get very tired swinging this, especially if you've got quite a lot of wood to split. The next two that I'm going to show you are Australian made. Is a 2.5 kg polished block splitter by Cyclone Australia. So this is our Aussie product. It's very popular. There it is there. Cyclone 2.45 kg lifetime warranty. So apparently if something breaks, the handle breaks or that, they'll as far as I know, they'll replace it. But have a look at it. 30-degree wedge, and you've got the sledgehammer part on the back. No fancy cheeks, no curved cheeks. Most of the block splitters look a little bit like that. The Ox and Cough in the Stool range has very, very, I think I'll just check to see whether it has curved cheeks. If it does, they'll be very, very slight. We'll just have a little bit of a look at that. Actually, it does. So yeah, surprisingly enough, hopefully you might be able to see this too. If I put that on top, you can see the light. There it is. You can see the light between it. So that's the curved cheeks. And if you put it this way, hopefully you'll be able to see it a little bit better if I turn around this way. If we put it like this, I'll put it that way, you should be able to see that it's higher in the middle. There it is there. So this is a design on a lot of European splitting axes and splitting mauls where you've got curved cheeks, and in the middle of the cutting edge it's raised on splitting axe and splitting mauls, so that's convex. The other one that's interesting, we spoke before about the Husqvarna, is it's a different type of shape. If you actually have a look at it there, it's higher in the middle, so it doesn't have curved cheeks. Totally different design. But they can get stuck in softer wood, right? So bear that in mind. The other one in the Cyclone, which we haven't spoken about, it's another 0.5 kilogram lighter and a shorter handle, 32 inches, 800 millimeters. It's called the Cyclone 2 kg Super Splitter. That's it there. And have a look at those curved cheeks. We'll just measure those. I think they're around 30-degree mark. So if we put this on them, hopefully we can measure this. And we're looking at 30 degrees. That's it there, right? So you've got 30 degrees on that, and it's raised in the middle, so it's convexed. So, you know, and it's reasonably sharp. Now this is another, and it's an 800 mil handle, and the weight of the handle is about 800 grams. Now I mentioned the word sharp. You'll hear a lot of people on a lot of the forums, and they'll turn around and say, a splitting axe and a splitting maul doesn't have to be sharp. So they're advising people don't have them sharp. And this advice is okay for softwood. But if it's sharp, splitting axe and splitting maul, it's certainly going to enter the wood much easier. The disadvantage of having it sharp on softwood, it's more liable to get stuck in there when you split. Total opposite here in Australia with the hardwood. As I mentioned before, and we spoke about the fibres that are twisted and interlocked, that's what you've got to split apart. Interlocking twisted fibres. That's why the edge of the axe, the splitting maul, needs to be sharp, because it's got to penetrate the timber in the first place to start the splitting action. So curved cheeks absolutely makes no difference. The design, to me, if it does make a difference, I've never noticed it. If it does make a difference, it's a small difference in Australian hardwood, really hardwood I'm talking about. Maybe there's a little bit of an improvement in your greenwood, but certainly in your really hardwood, like your grey box, which is 15 kilonewtons, really no design is better than one that I've ever experienced. So much so that when you look at the Cyclone block splitter, it's a 30-degree angle. No curved cheeks, just flat all the way. Can't get much more simple than that. Another splitting axe, which is almost virgin on the side of a Maul, is the Estwing, American company, 6-pounder, 2.7 kg, razor sharp, edge is about 40 degrees, which is almost the same as the cheeks. If we actually have a look at this, we'll just turn it around. Okay, so we'll look at this Estwing. Have a look at that wedge there, those curved cheeks. Around 40 degrees. And so is the beveled edge, because you've got the curve on the cheeks. They can still keep this around 40 degrees. So the S-Wing's got a fairly long handle on it. I'll just measure it actually. I was pretty sure that it was around 900, which is, I think it's still classified as a Maul. Yes, it's 900 millimeters in length, so it's 36 inches. But if you look at the head on it, it's very small head compared to a lot of the other block splitters or the other Mauls. But nonetheless, it is an excellent splitter. Okay, now let's have a look at the still range. And we've got the still range, and we've also got some of the other Fiscus range here, so we can talk about those. Some of those are really great products. So the first still here is called AX15P. P would most likely stand for plastic. Typically be fiberglass with polyamide, which is nylon. That's a composite handle. It's probably only about 1/2 kilo, so this has got a total weight of about 2 kg. It's a little small forestry type axe, fairly wide, good for small stuff, probably up to about 6 inches. The next one, and we'll just sort of take that down. You may be able to see that nice blade on there, and if you have a look there, made in Germany. So that's that one there, the AX15P. The next one is the AX20PC. All right, beautiful curved cheeks. They've got nice curved cheeks on them there. The wedge is 26 degrees. All right, so you've got a 26-degree wedge with a 30-degree secondary bevel on there. 750 mil long handle. Now, we did talk before about, I think we did, I'll just mention it again, wooden handles are much, much better at handling vibrations than plastic handles. Plastic handles will definitely cause much more vibration in hardwood. In softwood, the plastic handles don't give much of a problem. Now, the next one that we've got, we can have a little bit of a look at, is from Husqvarna. Totally different than the sledge axe. Handle's a little bit short for me. It's around 700 mil in length. It's called S2800, means the total weight of that is 2.8 kilo. It's got, I think, a 22-degree wedge with 25 degrees on the beveled cutting edge. It's probably over 100 mil, 110, something like that there. And it does work really well. It's probably more suitable for smaller people, having a 700mm length handle. I would have preferred that it actually had a 800. Now, we've got a few Fiscus up here. Little Fiscus axe, a little tiny one there. That one doesn't weigh much, 640 grams. It's the X7. This is good to put in a backpack if you're going camping, just to make a little bit of a fire of a night time. Okay, the next one that's at the back there, that's a hookaroon, the XA22. Fantastic, hardened bit of metal on the bottom. Great to pick up logs or move logs around that are on the ground. Saves your back. So I highly recommend a hookaroon. Sometimes in America they call them a pickaroon. But nonetheless, they do work good. The next one that we've got is the Fiscus X17. It's 1.5 kg in total, 600mm in length, right? So a bit of a short handle, good for small timber. Wouldn't be sort of splitting timber much more than about 6 inches with that, unless it was softwood. The next one's got a longer handle. It's 1.6 kilo. It's the X21, I believe, and it's got a handle of 720mm in length. So you can see the difference in length there. So, and again, it's probably good for around about 6 inches, maybe 7 inches timber. But certainly you can use it on larger rounds. It's just that you've got to put a lot more effort into it. Now, the biggest of the splitting axes are your X32, your X36. The difference in the X32 and the X36 is the handle length. 2.4 kg head weight, roughly 30 degrees on the wedge on both of them, and it's got a length of 815mm in length. The X27 there is identical, 2.4 kg head weight, but it has a length of 915. So you're talking 32 inches for the small one and 36 inches for the larger one. The handles on them are fairly lightweight. You can actually swing these and get quite a lot of velocity up there. You'll be surprised how good the Fiscus really work. A lot of people don't like them. I do like them. I reckon that they're great. I've got a choice of that many different splitting axes and mauls, but I do have a couple of favourites, and we'll talk about that in the end. We do have a old vintage Cyclone that I actually got at a market for about 28 Australian dollars. So it's got Cyclone, that's an old vintage one with a Aussie, probably spotted gum handle on it. It's not the typical 900mm length that they make now. It's only about 750 long. Then you've got the other Cyclone that's here, the 2 kg splitter that we saw before. That's another brand new one. And we had the Still Oxen Cough that was on the table before. That's where that goes. I've already spoken about that one. 800mm handle. And then if we go to the splitting 2.5 kg, that's another brand new one that I've got there, the 2.5 kg polished block splitter. Now I've left the best to last. This is the most expensive splitting maul that I've brought. Gränsfors Bruck, made in Sweden. About a 25 degree wedge on that. Nice splitting the maul head, which is great for driving in those wedges. I think it's about 35 degrees on this secondary bevel. This is said to be one of the best splitting mauls in the world, if not the best. At 350 Australian dollars it would want to be. Considering that this costs about $75, this costs about $170, and the 2 kg splitter costs about $74. If you have a look at a lot of the Fiscus, they're around about $120 here in Australia, so they're not cheap. And the Still that I've got up there, that 2 kg splitting axe, $205 that was, so they're not cheap either. So the cheapest, if we want to talk about cheap, we do have a lot of the cheap Chinese ones, and they're fiberglass in the middle with, I think it's polyethylene on the outside, and you'll see a lot of them around. Generally, the metal isn't anywhere as good on these cheaper ones. Typically on your still, it's called C60. The metal is important on any splitting axe or splitting maul. It's normally got a Rockwell hardness around about the mid-50s, 55, 56. You don't want it any harder than that, because even at 55, 56, it is starting to reach the stage where it becomes a little bit brittle, and if you go any more harder than that, you're liable to chip a sharp edge if you've got sharp edges on it, which I do have. I haven't chipped any edges yet, but certainly if you hit a nail, you're liable to chip that edge on there. With the softer ones, like these Chinese ones, made out of Chinesium metal, rather than chip them, you're liable to just take a big dent in them, which means you're going to have to grind them down. So I've shown you a whole bunch of splitting axes and splitting mauls. And if we look at the fiberglass composite type ones, like in the still, the Husqvarna and the Fiscus, the plastic handles, I did mention before that vibrations that run up your arm are really bad in really hard wood. The reason that it's not as bad in softwood, because if the axe goes into the softwood a little bit, it's not as high an impact. Whereas when you hit Australian hardwood that's really hard, it'll tend to bounce off, and that vibration will travel up your fingers and up your arm. It's usually not a problem for me. I usually don't complain about that, but in certain really hard wood, it can be a problem. It's not as bad on the wooden handles. I might get a little bit of vibration, but the plastic, the nylon composite type handles certainly give much more trouble. So even though the Fiscus IsoCore Pro says it has a unique anti-vibration system, well, I wouldn't go as far as saying anti-vibration. I would say a reduced vibration system, right, rather than anti-vibration, because anti-vibration, you're making the statement that it doesn't vibrate, and that's not true. The only other thing that I would say, if you're going to pay top dollar for a splitting axe or a splitting maul, you would expect it to come with an overstrike protector, like the stills, but this particular one doesn't, so I fitted a stainless steel one on that. I fitted a stainless steel one on the Husqvarna, and on the Aussie Cyclones I also fitted a stainless steel overstrike protector on those. Okay, look, for the beginners out there, you've witnessed a huge collection. I mean, I think 29 is quite a lot. And a lot of these are top brands out there. So I guess the question you're going to ask as a beginner, what are you going to buy? Yeah, you've got to make a decision, don't you? Now, there's two categories, softwood, hardwood. Softwood, you can split that with anything. It's a no-brainer, really. Get whatever you want for softwood. It's so easy to split. You can even split it in the middle, softwood. Hardwood is the total opposite. It's difficult to split, and you don't split it in the middle. You always split around the edges. That's the easiest way to split hardwood. So what is it that you need? Well, to me, if you're going to split wood, you need a splitting axe and a splitting maul. The best of both worlds. And if you're in Australia and you don't want to spend a lot of money, then my recommendation would be that these are about $75, right, at your local hardware Bunnings store. $75, you've got a 2.5 kg block splitter with a 900mm handle, 36-inch handle, simple wedge, works fantastic. This is 2 kg, handle weighs approximately 800 grams, so you've got a total weight of 2.8 kg versus a total weight of about 3.6. So you're almost a kilogram heavier with this one. This you can tend to swing, and the handle's a lot longer, 36 inches versus 32. So this, to me, I can swing this for hours on end. It's really good up to about a foot diameter, so anywhere from 6 inches up to about a foot. This is better for a maximum of probably up to about 2 foot. Anything bigger than 2 foot that you've got to split open, I use a hydraulic splitter. I can tell you what, if you're out there for a couple of hours, it's a good cardio workout. So that's my recommendation if you live in Australia. If you want to spend a little bit more money, you can either buy the Fiscus. They are extremely popular all over the whole world. There's a lot of people that don't like them. I've got nothing against them. As I said, you'll pay about $125 for a Fiscus. The Mauls around about $125 as well. So that's that one there. That's not a bad price. If you want to go a little bit more upmarket, you'll pay $175 roughly for that still splitting axe. The Maul is a little bit dear, about $190. The Husqvarna sledge axe is around about $175. The Estwing is around about $160. And we mentioned some of the prices of those still. The 2 kg was $205, and the most expensive of all was a Grand Force Brux. So as a beginner, one other point that I would make, that is much safer to split your timber on a chopping block. If you split on the ground, you risk the axe head or the maul head coming close to your feet within, say, 2 foot, if not closer. If you have a bit of timber that's about a foot high and about a foot and a half wide, and that's your chopping block, you're already elevated off the ground. And if you put a log on top, it's about a foot, foot and a half. You'll probably be pretty horizontal about your waist height. So when you bring your axe or your maul down, it'll be horizontal when it strikes. Much, much safer and less chance of an accident if you split that way. Holding the axe is also another problem. People incorrectly hold a splitting axe or a maul. They raise it way over the back of their head. We call that the barbarian strike. That's a waste of energy. You lift it up, and you do lift it behind your head, but not too much, and you use all your energy and strength to pull it down. You slide your hand right down to the bottom as it's coming down, and that is the correct way to strike the timber. The other thing that I would also mention, that the shorter handles will give you greater accuracy. Certainly when you go to the longer handles of 900mm on the maul, you've got a heavier weight. It's harder to control for accuracy, and you're liable to make a mistake, and that's why it's good to have an overstrike protector. So look, if you're new to splitting, I wouldn't jump in straight away using a 900 length handle on a maul. I would first go out and get a splitting axe that has a handle of 32 inches, which is 800mm in length. Get used to that, and when you're used to that and you're good with accuracy, then you can go up to the 900mm. You will find out, now this is interesting, if you turn around and say, let's just say that we've got a log, we've cut a tree up, and most of the rounds are around about a foot in diameter. Do you use a splitting axe or do you use a splitting maul? So here's the scenario. If you use a splitting axe, and it's about 2.5 kilo with an 800mm length handle, which is 32 inches, you're going to strike that timber. You're going to have to use more energy rather than if you use a maul. So if you split that same timber with a maul, your handle length will be 900mm length, and the head weight could be up to 3.6 kg. You're going to get tired splitting using the maul, but you may not have to swing it as much. Whereas if you use a splitting axe, you'll have to maybe swing it more often to split. Now, it depends on your physical physique. I've seen weightlifters that can't swing splitting axes and mauls that good. After about 15 swings, they're tired because they're practicing it at a gym to lift weights. Swinging an axe is different muscles than weightlifting, right? So, as I said, and it also depends on the height. Let's just say you're 5'6" and someone's 6'6". If you're 5'6", you don't want a handle probably of 900 mil in length. So, my advice is that when you go to buy a splitting axe or a splitting maul, pick it up and try and get a good feel for it when you're at the store. Raise it above your head. Get a bit of a feel for it. If it actually feels too heavy, you're probably better off getting something a little bit lighter. So, yeah, unless you could take it back and exchange it, but I doubt that because the moment you use it, it's secondhand. Look, I hope that information helps. Every one of these splitting axes that I've shown you, I've used. And I guess you might ask, do I have a favourite? Wow, that's a really hard question. And if I had to pick one, oh my God, which one would it be? Well, one of my favourites is the Stihl Oxenkoff here, the splitting axe. I find out that that's really great for rounds that are about 1 foot diameter. If I'm splitting anything from about 6 to 9 inches, I used to, well, I really do like using the Cyclone 2 kg super splitter with a handle that weighs 800 grams. On top of that, you're looking at a total weight of 2.8 kilo. So there's a big difference between the Stihl that's got a total weight of about 2.9 kilo. I think it's 2.9. We'll just have a look. It's written on the back. Can't remember the exact weight. That's why I write them on the back of the handle. 3.9 kg. So that's 2.8, and obviously with the handle's 1.1 kilo. Whereas the super splitter, 2 kg head weight, 8 to 900, depends on the metal ferrule. The overstrike protector weighs about 100 grams, so that's put it at 2.9. So there's a big difference between 2.9 kg on the super splitter to 3.9 kg on the Stihl, because that's an extra kilogram. That means that you've got to swing that with that extra weight, and that will tire you out. But you need that on the larger logs, right? So certainly one of my first purchases would be this Cyclone super splitter if you live in Australia. Around $72, you can't go wrong. These cheap Chinese ones, they're only about $35. If you only split wood once in a blue moon, go buy a cheap Chinese one made out of Chinesium metal. But if you're certainly going to be splitting wood because you've got a wood heater and you're going to be doing it for quite a number of years in the future, minimum purchase would be these two here for around $150. Good investment for $150. It will do all your Australian hardwoods. And it's only if you want to sort of really get into splitting axes that you might want to go to the more expensive, like the Husqvarna, the Stihls, or the biggest expensive one of all is the Grants Force Brux, with an Australian retail price of $350. Look, it's been a fairly long tutorial on all the different splitting axes. I'm not an expert at it, but I can tell you what, I do a lot of splitting because I think it's fantastic for a cardio workout. Look, I hope this information helps. If there's anything that you would like to ask me about any of the ones that I've presented, feel free to send us a comment, subscribe to the channel, and I'm interested in anything that the users have to say. It's one of the most important parts of having the users out there comment, and that's what makes me make these videos, is for the people that are out there, especially the newcomers, because a lot of the information isn't exactly out there. Hopefully I've explained everything in detail. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.